All right, so we've got Chip and Liran are going to be running the show today, since we've got Andrew and Jim. The usual suspects are at Robbins. So we're going to have Chip take it away. But before we do, I do want to add, I'm just going to put it in the chat. This is a link to our LinkedIn group. I know we had some difficulties with the Slack channel, so I did create a LinkedIn group. I think I know some of you are already in there, but if you want to join that, I just pop in and, hey, we have a change in time this week, or here's the slide deck that Andrew presented, just some extra stuff. So.
Okay, thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
How's everybody doing?
Great. Good.
Happy Thursday. So without Andrew or Jim here, our two bright, shining personalities, you guys are stuck with Liran and myself, which is a perfect opportunity to have more of a technical discussion. And it just so happens that we have the perfect reason to have that kind of SaaS call today. We actually want to dive in and have a discussion about a particular exploit that's being utilized right now by threat actors. We've seen it occur twice, and we've seen it occur indirectly. And Liran's going to get into the details of this more, but let me give you some background. About a week ago, one of our MSP partners, who is on this call, I'll leave him unnamed unless he decides he wants to reveal himself, let us know through support channels that he couldn't reconcile an account that appeared to have been compromised because they saw email forwarding activity on the account, and didn't see a login in SaaS Alerts that would correspond to how that breach would have occurred. It took us a while to do some research and figure out what went on. What we discovered was there is a login type that occurs in Microsoft 365 that about a year ago, our partners asked us to stop recording because it's so noisy. It's a WCSS login that occurs once you have already authenticated to 365, and now you click on Word, or you click on Outlook, or you click on Excel. Every new application that you open, including browsing around in the admin panel, kicks off another of these WCSS logins. We've been filtering them out of the UI and really doing that at partner request. We've realized that this is now being used as a successful exploit. The WCSS login can occur in two forms. One is a non-interactive login, which is what's most common. So you've already logged in once, and now you're selecting an application from inside the Microsoft suite. It's a non-interactive login. It just reads the token and says, okay, this guy's already logged in, so off we go. What's happened fairly recently is that this is being actively exploited in at least two different ways, and a third that we've heard of anecdotally. And that is that via a malware attack, probably phishing to get it there on a local device, the access token that's stored to support this interactive login is getting grabbed by a bad actor. Then that bad actor is using that access token to impersonate the user with typically a non-interactive login, although in the first case that we saw this, it was an interactive login. And then they pretty quickly bounce off of whatever location that they're at, VPN into a US location if it's a US company. So now they're under the radar acting like the user, and they set up email forwarding. We saw a second instance of this occur earlier this week on Monday, and we were already aware of it. So same exact situation, partner made us aware that there was email forwarding going on, couldn't find, was trying to backtrace it for themselves, looking in AD, sees these WCSS logins in Active Directory in the sign-in logs, but not in SaaS Alerts. So what we've done to get at this is, within the next 24 to 48 hours, maybe even as early as this afternoon, we'll be restoring those events so that they will now be coming in again. So you guys will all see a pretty dramatic uptick in login events. They will be low-level events. They will still trigger a critical alert if they are outside approved location. It is going to increase the volume of events that you see dramatically, because as you know, when users are in 365, they're bouncing around and opening apps and on and on and on. By the way, the same kind of login can occur when someone's using the local client apps, Outlook or Word or whatever else. It's also a non-interactive login. You just open the app, you're already authenticated. It uses a stored token, and away you go. And we're developing a second event type around this specific activity, where we see non-interactive logins that are not preceded within a specific time range by an interactive login. So I'm going to pause there for a second, then let Liran take us through some more details on this. And when we're done with that, we can discuss some recommendations that we would have of how you guys might want to deal with this. But first, let's just start from comments, questions from the floor, and see what people have got. So Steve. So Steve's asking if we can draft something up for this. Yes, we can. And actually, we have several articles that have been prepared on this. Microsoft has prepared an article. There's some articles in the press, and we'll put that together. We certainly want you guys to be able to explain this to your clients, and that actually will come in really handy when we get to recommendations. So Bryson, it sounds like is revealing himself. Bryson, do you want to come on camera or at least on voice and add any color or comment to this?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I'm in the truck right now moving locations, so that's the reason why I'm not on camera at the moment. But so we have been able to confirm through forensics and through others that is 100% what transpired. More kind of color to this situation is also like this particular attack and the vector that it came into was not a credential harvesting in the sense that the user had to enter credentials. Like you said, it was 100% a token hijack that took place. The user clicked on a link that took them to a page, and that page with no further interaction from the user initiated the credential harvesting that took place, and the session hijacking that took place. Of note with that also was that there was an additional document that was a part of that attack with the purpose that was to go forward and set up a C2 access potentially for later on for whatever they wanted. This user didn't click on that, so we are seeing that as a second piece to these attacks. But the only reason I bring that up is that in the first and what took place here, our EDR, our tools, everything else, industry standard, everything that was deployed, nothing's going to catch it. There's no specific malware that is going to trigger in this situation. It is all the script within the browser that it is doing the session hijacking. So this is a really difficult one to prevent and is going to, at this time, without additional conditional access measures that most end users and most companies are just simply not going to allow, is going to be a issue of alerting and making sure that we see it. It's also multi-factor authentication is not going to save you in this situation either, because that session is already authorized. So session timeouts can help, and a few other conditional access policies. But again, those are going to be user specific as to how much they want to support that.
Bryson, thank you for adding that additional info. And I'm glad that you guys got to the bottom of whether it was, a malware infestation on the device from phishing or, unfortunately, even worse, just a straight up browser hack, simply by clicking on a link and opening another tab in the same browser, they're able to harvest this piece. Of note, Bryson sleuthing, I think, and the second partner the same way, realizing that there was email forwarding being set up, which was fishy enough. we alerted on that. SaaS Alerts played, I think, it's a small role in providing the forensic trail, the start of the trail. And Bryson and his team ran it down from there internally to try and compare it and brought it to our attention. Any other comments before we discuss? Have Liran take us through some of the details?
Chip, Andy has his hand
Yeah,
up.
Andy's there.
I can't see Andy on screen. Andy.
Hey, the question I had is there a way for us to force a token expiration on a more regular basis, especially during business hours, and to be able to set preference to these alerts outside of business hours? If someone was to, I mean, if we're forcing a token expiration, then that would seem to limit the scope of this much more substantially. Am I incorrect in understanding this?
No, you're correct. And that's one of the recommendations that we would make, is that look, this is a controversial thing, right? Users like to be able to log into Microsoft once and never have to get challenged again, especially once you put MFA on, then they get all pissed off. This has been one of my soapbox points for a long time about 365 and the entire way Microsoft handles security. I think it's, quite frankly, just bad practice that they allow for tokens that last for months. I mean, I'm sure you guys have all experienced this. You can log into 365 and leave it open in your browser and never have to get to re-credentialize. Same thing with your local applications. Once you have a token on them, if you're connecting, locally installed Word or Excel, unless somebody expires those tokens, you're permanently connected. And if they can exploit this through a browser, you can be sure that there's malware out there that can exploit it from the native apps. So it's something to be concerned about. But yes, and you absolutely can determine to expire sessions. That's a setting inside of 365 admin. You can expire sessions much more frequently than Microsoft's default.
And based on the observation of this method, would a 24-hour token expiration be adequate, or is that inadequate?
Well, I don't think that there's a simple answer to that, right? Because if the hacker, if the bad actor is attempting to do this anywhere inside any window, even if you set it down to an hour, if they happen to hit you inside of an hour, the token's still there. So
yeah, we're just looking at reducing the capability or duration. Okay, I'm done
so
with
if
my
I were a
remarks.
business
Thanks.
owner running 365, I would ask my MSP, I want this set to 8 hours. I don't want anyone, every time someone comes in and starts a new workday, they need to re-authenticate. That would be my personal attitude about it. You guys all know that your customers, much better than we would, and different customers are going to react to that differently. I think that if we provide you guys some documentation on this, the articles we have, we'll certainly do a write-up and share it with the team. And you share directly with, the management and business owners of your customers. Look, this is a real risk. Hopefully they'll be accepting of the notion that they should have a reduced token time.
Just the other thing I want to add to this is, even with an 8-hour timeout, right? If they log in 8 a.m. and they click on this link at noon, it's still going to work, right? And then the other thing is, even if you go with a 5-minute timeout, a hacker can enhance this thing to more of a man-in-the-middle type of situation, where like you've already clicked the link, and at that point, I may ask you to MFA in there and capture these things, right? So even a 5-minute timeout may not necessarily get this whole thing resolved. I think it'll lower the risk, but it's not a end-all be-all type of solution.
Bryson's got his hand up again. Bryson?
Yeah, and I can add a little bit more color on that. Within 10 minutes at 8 a.m. Local time, within 10 minutes of that link being clicked, they were in the environment. So they've definitely, we know for a fact this came from, outside the US, as most of these do, but they've definitely learned their lessons and are not just operating in, overnight time frame. And once they get access, they're going to quickly jump on it.
So interestingly enough, Bryson, you wouldn't know this, but the second incident of this came from the exact same IP address as yours, which I find remarkable. Like in the same countries, the chance of this happening twice within 7 days to the relatively small universe SaaS Alerts customers is, I find, pretty remarkable. But literally the same actor or group of actors working from the same spot. So that would
Yeah.
lead to the next recommendation, and Bryson alluded to this, for your customers that have the ability based on their licensing for you to set up custom conditional access rules. We'll be happy to share the IP address. I'd also recommend that unless it's really necessary, you set up a conditional access rule to block Nigeria. That's where this came from. Like I can't imagine there's a whole lot of customers of our partners that need access, that have team members that need access from Nigeria, but wherever possible, I consider blocking it. So those are really the recommendations is additional conditional access rules, reducing the timeout, making sure you have MFA set up, even though that won't necessarily help you with this, but this is another driver to bring the point across to your customers that, even if you're a small company, you're important. And Bryson's got his hand up again. Bryson, I have a question for you. I don't remember the details on your customer, and I certainly wouldn't want you to share anything about their business, but would you consider them a high value target?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely they targeted the right people, but it was also through a breach of another client and another, not our customer, but somebody else, right? So that was the other part that made this one difficult, is that it's not like, it came from some random address. It came from one of their clients. So there was no reason for the end user to not suspect that it was exactly what they asked them to click on. So this one specifically was a difficult one from a prevention standpoint. But the other thing I just wanted to touch on, and I'll quit hopping in here, I apologize, is on the location geo-blocking. The only reason that we were able to catch this situation was because the attackers messed up and weren't on their VPN for one connection that they made, and that triggered a forward alert that had an IP address that we didn't recognize. So when they messed up and did that, that's when we were able to key in and be like, okay, this looks odd. So, and by all indications, it was literally just their mistake that they weren't connected to the VPN into the US, and they instantly jumped off of there after they set up and realized that they weren't connected to the VPN. So geo blocking, which isn't going to save us in these situations either.
May help, but
for sure, definitely do it. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but in this exact one, wouldn't have helped us.
What I find interesting, Bryson, is the second situation with the second partner and their client was identical to yours, which, there's, I guess 2 doesn't make a pattern yet, but it certainly leads to the start of a directional arrow. So they either didn't learn their lesson with you and the 30 other people that they probably captured on the same day, or they just have some bad habits, which is great. So Liran, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, and I'd like to just have you show everyone what these WCSS events look like in the sign-in logs and Active Directory. You're going to see a very similar volume of data start hitting SaaS Alerts. And I actually hope that somebody on this call was with us last year and was one of the people that said, please stop these alerts. And you can speak up if you'd like to, but this is why we actually decided to shut them down, because at the time there wasn't an exploit that was being actively used here, and we felt, you guys already know, we respond to our clients. When enough people ask us, we make changes. So Liran, take it away.
Thanks, Chip. Can you guys still see my screen? Okay. So this is a Microsoft sign-in log for one user. This is, Chip said, we're looking to release this in the next 24 to 48 hours. This is our QA tester generating these things so we can evaluate them a couple of hours ago. So perfect test case to walk through, right? So I'm filtering for this user particularly, and this area in orange indicates a 2-minute time frame. So you can see the number of logins that are generated. in a 2-minute time frame, the timestamps that are in green are identical to one another. So these 42 seconds, there's 3 of them that happen at the exact same time. All 3 of these guys are these types of shell client type of logins that are taking place, identical, right? So there's a whole bunch of these shell clients login that are taking place. And this is why partners were asking us, right? Like, you need to quiet this thing down, because it's basically doubling the amount of sign-ins that are taking place as users sign in from one application into the other. So in the short term, we're going to re-enable it so that if this does occur out of Nigeria, you are going to get an outside approved location, assuming you haven't put Nigeria on your list of approved countries.
Yeah, so back to Bryson's point, conditional access from Microsoft won't necessarily help this. And in the same way, if you have a hacker who is intelligent enough or devious enough to have done the research and they know where a company is located, they VPN to that country. Obviously, SaaS Alerts is not going to pick that up as an OAL either. So it's still very important to look for the other activities that hackers generally take when they do successfully compromise an account. In both these cases, it was email forwarding that flagged our partner that something was going on, the email forwarding that they saw in SaaS Alerts.
So this is just the initial cut that we're taking at this. We wanted to re-enable these as quickly as possible. In the next iteration, as Chip mentioned, we're going to be evaluating how do we still show these things without creating, I don't know, like 15 of them within a 90-second time span. So that's the next thing that we're going to be looking at.
We're going to another comment from Jason. Correct, Jason. They are most likely going to be coming from the same IP. So our approach to this, as Liran just alluded to, is to refine this and collect these into perhaps an event that looks like, interactive sign-in event. There were 25 interactive sign-ins for, I'm going to pick on you, Scott, because you're right there, for Scott Lumpkin at lumpkin.net that occurred between X and YZ, or 25 interactive and 23 non-interactive sign-ins. We'll try and provide as much detail about it as makes rational sense and pull them together. The trickier part is going to be trying to figure out, okay, do we have non-interactive sign-ins that don't appear to be associated with an interactive sign-in? There is something called a correlation ID inside all of the Microsoft data returns that we get back, and we're researching to figure out if the correlation ID for non-interactive or any WCSS login should have a corresponding correlation to an actual interactive sign-in where MFA is passed and regular credentials are used. So we're digging into that. Okay, other thoughts or questions on this from anyone? Okay, Liran, I think you can unshare. Let's open the floor for general discussion. Any topic that you guys would like to address, either that's tangential or outside of this one, we can take on.
A question. Since the geo-mapping, if they don't forget to use a VPN, it's good to have, because not everyone's going to think that's, like you said, know where their actual destination is. Is there anything else that can help within the rules, or the if-thens, or anything that you have or that you've heard of that could help? Because it is, with a lot of small businesses, you can say US is okay, or maybe North America, you can pretty much spell out where it's okay to receive communication and emails from.
Mhm.
So that's a big asset. If the asset's so easily tripped up, is there anything else?
I mean, I would certainly recommend that for all of your clients that you leave the default settings on for most of our critical alerts. The ones that we recommend you can turn down if you have MFA enabled are the multiple login failures can go from a medium to a low, and the multiple can also go to a low, because generally speaking, when you've got MFA enabled, you don't need to see the noise on them. Everything else I would leave there, because in the end, the rest of the events that SaaS Alerts reports on are really designed around behaviors that attackers are going to take when they successfully compromise an account. So you can combine those in respond rules in any way you wish.
I think we lost Chip there.
So I have another potential solution to this that I think is at least worth mentioning, right? And that solution is, right, if users don't like to log in. Chip, are you back?
I am, but go ahead.
Okay. So one potential solution is put your end users on a static VPN and block everything else. I mean, they're not going to really like it, but it'll do the job. Anyone outside that VPN is a no-no.
All right.
Jason had said he witnessed a new potentially malicious attack vector. Did you want to talk about that, Jason?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'd actually appreciate everyone's feedback if they've seen anything similar to this. We have a client that we're demoing SaaS Alerts for. We haven't closed them on the actual selling them the application as of yet. So we were just monitoring to gather data within their tenant. And happened to notice when we reviewed SaaS Alerts, because obviously we don't have response set up for them yet, because they're not paying for the service. But notice the particular user is in Victoria, BC, Canada, and noticed a IP address login that was from London, England at 4 o'clock in the morning. What was strange about this is there was no actual action taken within the logs other than an Azure Active Directory app that was integrated by whoever this malicious user was in the UK. The app was called Modulus. I think it was modulus.org was what the URL that was attached to the Azure application entry was. Went and tried to look it up, couldn't find anything on it. Researched applications similar to that for Active Directory, couldn't find any references to it anywhere. What concerns me about this more is it had given itself permission to read things in the inbox, pull information out of Outlook, but I couldn't find any corresponding logs that occurred that actually told me what the application was doing in the background. I have only had a chance to maybe spend an hour reviewing this up to this point, but I'm wondering if anyone else has seen a tactic where they are basically logging in immediately, adding an Azure application into the tenant via that user, which I imagine could do all sorts of scary things in the background, where you found logs to find out what was happening, what that application was doing, if there are any in Microsoft. Because basically they logged in, we had it locked out within 4 hours kind of idea. But in 4 hours, you can pull a lot of information out of a mailbox. So that's where my concern is. So has anybody seen this tactic beforehand, first off? And second of all, ideas on how to mitigate it and ideas on what it could be doing in the background.
So Jason, I've got a quick question for you. I know Andy has his hand up, and I think Bryson may have a comment on this. Oh no, he's got to drop. What was the scope in which this enterprise app was installed? Was it just for this user, or was it enterprise-wide for everyone?
It was just this user from what I can tell from the logs.
Okay, so they didn't have admin permissions, so
No.
It was potentially drastic.
Yeah.
So I've read about malicious enterprise apps. Microsoft doesn't put you through a process of looking at code. They just demand that as the owner of an enterprise app that you provide an authorization screen, which you guys have all been through when you connect your tenants into SaaS Alerts, so you're familiar with that. And obviously this person would just click right through that and run with it. It's, no one else in our ecosystem has reported this yet that I'm aware of. Liran or any of our other guys on the call, have we heard of this from any of the partners?
No, I haven't heard of it, but the other thing I'm thinking about is if you haven't seen any activity on it, this could be a pretty slick way, right, of injecting this thing and just letting it sit dormant for a while. So it goes by unnoticed and then slowly start acting on it.
See, that's my other side of this concern. I mean, obviously, we all see in our Microsoft 365 deployments, you see the Apple integration for Apple Mail because somebody set it up on their phone, or Android, or all these apps that are basically, over the last year, we've seen integrated into these apps by individual users. And that is obviously allowing those applications and the iPhones to integrate and view all of the mail. And I haven't seen any logs other than creation of new email items or that kind of thing. So what I'm wondering is, if you inject this thing, are they basically downloading the entire contents of said mailbox to a system where they can act on it completely outside of any kind of interaction? So first off, we have all data stolen in the mailbox, as I imagine worst case scenarios. And no, we won't see anything in the logs until such time as they start sending mail, creating new mailbox items, moving things around. But you can basically pull absolutely everything out of the mailbox, as I thought in the worst case scenario, if this app integration or Azure app integration could do everything that a mail app or an Android app or whatever the case happens to be that we see being integrated by individual users in Azure right now.
Yeah. So two comments. The first is Adam in the chat asked the question. You can limit this by requiring admin approval through the in Office 365. And yes, I believe that is an option that you have that would prevent any user level scope from installing an enterprise app. The second comment I'd make is that we have an enhancement request in already that maybe a result of this group's input, I'm not sure if it is or not, to create an enterprise app report, very similar to the way we cover OAuth usage today. Whenever someone uses OAuth to connect to an application that's not an enterprise app, we report on that. We've had people request for us that we create an enterprise app report that will just list the enterprise apps that are in each tenant. So we are working on that. And then Andy, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, my question may be a little naive. If we force a VPN connection for Microsoft Azure, for Microsoft 365, do we then restrict the ability of an approved token access to be hijacked someplace else in the United States? In other words, if I'm requiring everyone to go through our corporate firewall or a cloud-based firewall solution, does that help eliminate this token access piece?
So they could still steal the token, but
right.
If they're not connecting from an approved IP address block via the VPN, they wouldn't be able to execute.
So that would be a way to defeat this in a sense, if you required access through a corporate firewall, for sake of discussion.
I would think it would. I would certainly want to test that to make sure. I mean, I think it sounds logical in theory that should work, but I would, it's something that I would want to test.
Okay. That was my question.
Anyone else have any feedback on Jason's? Have we had anybody else on this call experience something similar where we have a mystery enterprise app show up that is dropped in by a user? And Jason, I have a question for you as well on this. Is the way you notice this with the tenant through the alerting from SaaS Alerts that there was this successful login at 4 a.m. from London?
That is correct, yes.
Got it. Okay. Just out of curiosity, that's not going to be enough to help you close the deal with the client?
Well, I gotta close the meeting, but yeah, no, it won't be a problem, I think now, but.
Yeah, the only way to do that is to, lock down the apps that are integrating to Office 365. So you could actually approve all the apps, and then if something tries to add it, they could actually ask for permission. So, and then you can create groups. So if only you want certain groups to use that app, you can. But yeah, if you don't have that lockdown, then anybody can set up anything, and get whatever they want.
Agreed. Again, the client hasn't allowed us to do the security hardening yet, so
Yeah.
we're working on that.
Okay. Other thoughts, questions? All right, guys, I think we can leave it there and leave it a slightly shorter SASE call than we typically have. If no one's else got other topics that they want to cover. We'll leave the more sales oriented coaching to Andy and Jim for our next session, and hope you guys have a great week. We'll see everyone next week. Steve is chiming in. Thanks, good call. We'll see you all next week. And obviously, you guys know how to reach us anytime you need to. If you have follow-up thoughts on any of this, please reach out.
I did have one question. For the MFA report, is that pulling from just whether we're enforcing it or not? Because I looked at least mine, it's showing that a bunch are not 2FA, but we've enforced it all through conditional access. So they have to do it that way. We're just not manually setting people to enforce or enabled, but they are registered. I don't know if that's something unique with my client, or is that something?
No, that's something universal, Bill. So if your method of enforcing 2FA is through conditional access, we aren't picking that up in the SaaS Alerts MFA report yet. Liran, you want to comment on that? I think we have a work in progress on that.
Perfect.
Yeah, you're talking about a disconnect between the MFA in Active Directory versus what we show in the MFA report?
No,
Yeah.
we're talking about MFA that's enforced via conditional access policy.
Well, no, I like the report, but when I look at the report, it's saying that a whole bunch of people are not enabled. And there's two ways of enabling 2FA. You can either do it manually on the client or just, register it. So either administratively or let the users do it through the registration. So I don't know if you could change the report to just check the credentials of the user, see if they have a registered MFA instead of just the enforced enabled one through the administrative place. If that makes sense.
It does. And a few weeks ago on one of the SASE calls, we actually went deep into this, because up until that point, like that screen that you're referring to, the Active Directory screen that says what I thought, and I think most people thought, is an MFA status, is not the actual user's MFA status. And I believe that our support guys put an article to kind of explain this whole thing, but it was just so hard to believe when we did the initial analysis, because my specific user had MFA on it, but when you looked at that report, it was like, disabled. So when you actually look at the raw data that comes out and compare it against real users, it doesn't really line up, right? And I think what we'll ask is, I'll ask one of our support guys to send you that article, because we basically spell the entire thing out in terms of why those two things are not disconnected slightly.
And we've got another question here that we're going to address, but Anthony, do you happen to have, I know you were involved in that before, do you happen to have a link to that article you could post right in here?
Let me check.
Yeah, thanks. Adam asked about alerting on creation of new rules, not just the initial act of forwarding. I think, Adam, so you're talking about a user has already set up forwarding in their email address, in their email account. And now they go ahead and set up another email forwarding rule, and you're asking if we alert on that. Do I interpret that correctly? Answer
No, I mentioned earlier up in the chat that one of the things that hackers can do is create new rules to delete or move emails rather than just forwarding them. It's a way of covering their tracks or trying to stay hidden that they've actually compromised the mailbox.
Yeah, so SaaS Alerts will pick up. There's really three different ways that that rules can get hijacked by hackers. The first is and this is the most difficult one that we actually have a hard time picking up. When the user enables a rule directly on a mail client, that rule is actually processed on the mail client. It's not processed at the service level, at the server level. So those are rule changes that we haven't yet figured out a way to change or to capture. When a user sets up a rule using the Outlook web client, we do see that. And when an administrator sets up a mail routing rule, we will see that, or an inbound mail rule to either move it to an inbox or anything else. So for activities that are conducted inside the web-based products, and I believe the Outlook client, as long as it's the Outlook client that's used, but not some other client, then we can see Does that answer your question, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it's the inbox rule that I'm talking about, so that's server side, not a client side one. But you did break up towards the end, but I think you said that you can alert on that at the moment.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything in the in Respond though, is there, to pick up on that?
No, I don't believe there is. Wait, hold on a second. Yes,
I see there's an email forwarding one, but not a general.
Not a general rule.
No.
That's an enhancement request we can consider for Respond. Okay, any others? All right, so what we'll do, we'll dig up that KB article for you guys regarding the MFA report and the differences between the various methods of setting MFA and what we pick up and what we don't, and how we learned that Microsoft's own display of MFA inside of 365 admin and or Azure AD, depending on what your licensing is and how you approach it, isn't actually reporting on the state at which the user is at that particular moment. So we'll get that out to the group. Trying to think the best way. Michelle, what's the best way for it? Probably in the newsletter, we can get that out so that everybody can have access to it.
Yep, we'll put it in the newsletter. And if you've joined the LinkedIn group, we can pop it in there as well.
Okay.
All right.
Everyone, thank you for your time.
Sorry. I just wanted to remind everyone, Tuesday, we have a webinar with Wes Spencer from Fifth Wall Solutions. He's going to be talking about cyber insurance. So if you're around, I'm going to drop the link in there. So it should be good. It'll be Andrew will be on that call as well. So if you missed him today, you can see him there as well.
There you go. You get the real MC back.
No, you were great, Chip. You were awesome. And Liran, of course.
All right. Thank you all. Have a terrific weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.